Currently, this province is not doing well. All other provinces are cooperating, but very funny, this province is always represented in Cape Town during National Men's Parliament. So we hope this time men of this province will take us very serious and try to be part of implementation. Colleagues, in Cape Town, we do have our national chairperson who Comrade Ndando, Comrade Ndando, are you there? And try to
Yes, SJ, I am here. I hope you can hear me.
Colleagues, in Cape Town, we do have our national chairperson who Comrade
Thank you very much.
Comrade Ndando, are you there? And try to
Yes, SJ, I am here. I hope you can hear me.
Colleagues, in Cape Town, we do have our national chairperson who Comrade
Thank you very much.
Comrade Ndando, are you there? And try
Yes, SJ, I am here. I hope you can hear me.
Colleagues, in Cape Town, we do have our national chairperson who Comrade
Thank you very much.
Comrade Ndando, are you there?
Lost out. Apologies about that. I don't know what happened. But I
Yes,
wanted
SJ,
to
I
thank
am
you
here.
very much, you can hear me. Secretary General, for leading us during today's presentation.
Thank you very much.
And I also wanted to say thank you as well to MEC in Gauteng for welcoming us. And I think we are really grateful for the partnership that I think this meeting will also serve to affirm our men's programming going forward, especially for Gauteng. And I would like to start by acknowledging and greeting all the representatives of the different partners that we are working with under our Dagwanere Eme movement, in as well as the Sanak Men's Sector, Men Championing Change, and other programs that we are working with. I think it is very important that we are gathered today here in this manner to really launch this men's program of action, which I think is a very critical event under the circumstances. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. To be able to really go ahead with the, I am hearing my.
They are inviting me for the deputy post in Brussels.
I am hearing feedback, so.
Go ahead, Chairperson.
All right. I think I will just try and master this and not really take a lot of time, because I think the technology is posing some challenges, but we will try and proceed with this. I'd like to acknowledge all our government partners, particularly led through the Department of Social Development, and especially with the undying support and continuing support and sustained support that we get from our Honorable Mayor Henrietta Bokopane Zulu, our DM. And I think today, as we had mentioned, we are grateful to this department, because even in the province, we now have been welcomed as part of today's event by Honorable MEC. So I think we really like to acknowledge the contribution that is made by social development in really supporting all the efforts that the men's movement is undertaking to really address the issues that pertain to men and boys in this country, particularly fighting a lot of ills that are really driven, like the MEC has put it, that the source of a lot of gender-based violence that we experience in the country is patriarchy, and by patriarchy, effectively referring to men as the perpetrators of all of these unwanted issues that we face. It is also important for us to acknowledge the National Assembly office, as well as the National Council of Provinces that is also represented here today by Honorable Mayor Sylvia Lucas, as well as Honorable Lechesa Tsenoli, as well as all people who are working in those offices. And in fact, all government partners, as you have mentioned, we really are grateful to have them and partner with them in all of the work that we are doing. We also would like, as we have mentioned, to acknowledge the UN Women and other women organizations that are part of today's proceedings, as well as all partner organizations, all men who are represented through various partner organizations that are driving this program today. As I had mentioned, that today's meeting is really one of the turning points that we have had since we met in Cape Town for our second men's parliament, which came up with a number of a concrete plan of action where that are going to be undertaken going forward before we come together again to gather as men through the next parliament in the coming year. And a lot of this, I think, as SG had mentioned, is that it really pertains to making sure that we go to all the corners and of communities in South Africa where men are found, and in fact, where all of these issues are being experienced. And particularly, one of the most important undertakings that we have had is to really work with the houses of traditional leaders in the country, and they are also here today represented. So without taking a lot of time, those key undertakings are really coming together today as we are launching and as we are gathered today here to really launch our program of action. I'm not going to take a lot of time because a lot of technicalities have really taken on the time, but I would really like to welcome everybody and really be grateful that we are able to gather in this manner. And in fact, there is a lot that is going to come out of our engagements today as we drive this program with all of the commitment of men in South Africa to really stand up in a very uncompromising way and see that we get to a point where we respond effectively, but most importantly, rid our communities of the effects of gender-based violence in the country. Thank you very much. Over to you, SG.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chairperson Ndandoyola. I can feel tension here. Matoda! 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 Insimbi! Thank you very much, Comrade Ndando. Without wasting time, ngizocela uDr. Hannah, our National Deputy Chairperson of the men's sector and the head of Takuwane Regime Secretariat to talk to us.
Thank you very much, Program Director, and all protocol observed. Fortunately, it's very nice when you are having an event on the 1st of April, because any glitch or any shortfall, you just say, no, don't worry, it's April's. So the right things that we do is the 1st of April. The wrong things that we do is April's. Welcome everyone to this very important day for the men's sector. Just to take us back a little bit, Deputy Minister, in 2013, in April, we were convened by former Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe at Newtown, Tavern Hall, where we engaged as men of South Africa, and we signed the declaration that we will eliminate violence against women and children. That was April 2013. Fast forward, by the time we called Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa in 2015, in August, the numbers of violence against women and children were actually rising. And so we had to self-introspect as men of South Africa to say, but this can't be normal. And when we looked at the activities that men were engaged with, they could be appreciated and noted, although they were not given the results, but we had to make a diagnosis. And what we identified as our main challenge was that we were not coordinated. And that was having a negative impact on the work that we were doing. We were working in silos, in pieces, not knowing each other. So when we met in 2015 under the banner of Takwane Ring, it was precisely for us to engage. So how do we mobilize ourselves? But more importantly, how do we coordinate ourselves following us mobilizing? And under the theme, institutionalizing a responsive men's movement, we said, let us look to Parliament for that guidance, because fortunately, the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, as far back as 2004, had the foresight of public participation through the concept of sectoral parliaments. Women's Parliament was our inspiration, with the youth parliaments as they were the first to kickstart the process. So we looked to that model. And so we agreed to say, let us formalize how we organize through these men's parliaments. Fortunately, parliaments is anchored on public participation, but also accountability. Hence, that we must always and consistently account to the commitments that we make as men of South Africa. And of course, the rule of law. Now, we came up with 4 objectives from that sitting in August when we launched Takwane Ring with the current president, President Cyril Ramaphosa. And the first one was, of course, as I stated, about how do we institutionalize organizations working with men and boys through men's parliament. But as we're organizing, we said we can't organize to further terrorize South Africans. So again, being inspired, I know as far back as the mid-50s, the women had already championed the Women's Charter. And of course, in the 90s, it was reviewed, and even currently it's going under review. So when we check, we noticed that we don't have a charter as men of South Africa. So we said, let us also establish that process. We actually, Mr. Ngomani, you'll remember that it was in this building that we held our first consultative meeting for the men's charter. And we then had a third objective around a 365-day program of action, which Deputy Minister Henrietta Zulu, we brought that program of action to life when we called on the current Deputy President David Mabuza, when we went to Ilembe District in KZN to launch the Men Championing Change program, because we were essentially programmatizing that particular objective by saying through Men Championing Change, we are going to prevent gender-based violence and femicide and HIV and TB. And led by the Department of Social Development as the fourth objective, we also wanted to recognize men who are community investors and developers through the South African Men of the Year. And that was a program that we initiated in 2015 and sustained since then. When we went to Parliament again this year, we took a resolution of strengthening that Parliament. Now, since we made that commitment in 2015, we've made quite significant progress in that we launched the provincial men's parliaments, all 9 of them. In 2018, we already moved with that process, which led us to the inaugural men's parliament in 2018, at the Parliament of South Africa. And in that parliament, we took a resolution to the inaugural resolution parliament to ensure that we roll out the district men's parliaments. And between 2018 and to date, we have successfully launched 70% of the district men's parliament in South Africa and sustained them. But when we went to Parliament this year, we said, let us further strengthen the institutionalization of responsive men's movement. So we committed that this is the term as we go to National Men's Parliament once every 2 years of traditional council and local municipality men's parliaments. So all 882 traditional councils in South Africa, led by the chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders, Nkosi Mahlangu, have endorsed, and we are all committed to launch a men's parliament traditional council, a very important step, because many of the issues that we discuss around social behavior and the behavioral change, Amakhosi are the custodian of culture and traditions, which essentially is about behavior and instilling masculinity and the concepts of our understanding of masculinity and how we engage with patriarchy. So this is a very exciting period for us as the men's sector, that we have finally reached this point where twice every year, men of South Africa will be convened across the country in the months of March, as well as in September, where all men of South Africa will be convening twice a year in all these 882 traditional councils. We're actually going to be launching in the coming weeks and at national level. Then we go to provincial launches, but from June, July, and August, we will be launching all the 882. Already the men are working on the ground to put the dates, to consult with COCTA and the House of Traditional Leaders and the Provincial Council of AIDS to make sure that we roll out these launches. And we will also do the same for the 226 local municipalities. So that was the flagship commitment, where in this program of action that we're launching today, we're going to ensure that we truly organize ourselves as men of South Africa and respond to the issues so that our programs are brought to life. But we also, through the Men Championing Change program, formally will be carrying with us both the National Strategic Plan on HIV, TB, and STIs, as TB still remains the leading cause of death, with most TB cases in terms of morbidity and mortality linked to HIV. And of course, the National Strategic Plan that was launched last year in April on gender-based violence and femicide, those will be our flagship national strategic plans that we advance as the men's movement. And through the Men Championing Change, those will be our flagship. But of course, we'll be looking at local context issues as well through this men's parliament that must be engaged, endorsed, and processed by the men in various areas across the country. So it be issues of the socioeconomic issues of crime, issues of building of society, creating a caring society, prosperous society. So it's not just limited to issues of health and gender-based violence. So we'll ensure that through this program, we advance all the other various national strategic plans that are quite important. Now, as I bring my address to an end, Deputy Minister will also be working with Parliament, because when we went to Parliament, we said our men's charter has not been adequately consulted. We still need South African men to engage further with our charter. And the reason why we do not rush this process is that we are not interested in a consultant type document that was created in some room. It looks beautiful and just given to say, men of South Africa, here's a document, run with it. We want to own it so that we can hold each other accountable to say, these were our agreements as South African men. So if one of us betrays that social contract, we want to have the authority to say, but you are betraying how we have agreed as South African men to uphold ourselves. So as much as we launched it in 2015, we've been very mindful that every South African must have an opportunity to input on this men's charter. So with Parliament, we'll also be working as we move around the country in these traditional council, local men's parliament, provincial men's parliaments, and national. We will be consulting with men all over, but more importantly with other stakeholders, the LGBTI community, women, children, youth, other formations, labor, business, government, so that by the time we go back in 2022 to National Men's Parliament, we go back with a charter that South African men can own. And so the charter is going to be a very important process through the parliamentary review mechanism. that we will also be advancing. But we would especially like to acknowledge the Department of Social Development for the support, because ultimately our program is a behavioral change program. It's deliberate that the anchor department, although we work with all departments, all sectors of society, but ultimately our deliverable is a change behavior, because our position is that once the behavior is transformed, every other area is taken care of. It's very difficult. Dr. Mkhize can prepare all the injections and the pills, but if our behavior is not to go and seek help, then it becomes futile. So ours is a program that will ensure that we really advance the social behavioral change program. And to UN Women, we will be working very closely with the agency to make sure that we don't lose each other as men and boys. One of the mistakes that we made and acknowledged was that when we started the empowerment of the girl child, we left the boy child behind. And we are seeing the results of that. Very angry boys, very disempowered boys. I think there's consensus in the room. We don't want to repeat that mistake. So we want to make sure that we move together, because we live in the same house. So that coordination, that cooperation, that cohesiveness and coherence is absolutely paramount, so that we raise strong families. So we really appreciate this partnership. In closing, the men of South Africa, we have a plan. Let us go on the street. Let us champion this plan, and don't ask for permission to develop South Africa. If the mayor somewhere there is not there, he'll get the report, or she'll get the report. We are going to that council chamber. We keep it moving. We can't postpone development. We can't postpone GP. We won't actually postpone gender-based violence. So we will be coming to the council chambers. We will be coming to the traditional councils. We will mobilize ourselves. So don't worry and think we're coming with stress. We will mobilize ourselves. But we're just asking for those doors to be opened. But even if they are not opened, you will even find us under a tree just outside with that report, because we will meet, and we are ready as South African men to take this process to the ground and also become street champions, where we start with ourselves in our household, but on our street, before we even meet at the traditional council and local municipality. So in those words, I'd like to thank you, Program Director, and we're saying, Takwani Rime, let us institutionalize this responsiveness movement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khanaka. Matota. Matota. As we busy. Thank you very much, Dr. Khanaka. We are expected to see Besemakhaya, engage our traditional leaders, sebenze those municipal chambers. And you are expected, colleagues, kunomunye ubaba lapha eNatdo angumbiza ngegama in case ulale ubukele TV. Ngiyamcela ngithi, can you start something and engage boys in our areas? And I knew ukuthi ingane zakhe zistoked and bakunyawo. I thought uzovuma. No, let's do it. Instead, wabuza ukuthi how much azoyithola when we start this campaign. Abanye, when we start meetings in communities, but study data. And as good for us to stop DPV, we need data. Because we're talking about something that is taking place in your own area. So, as in the immense movement, at F5, let me put it that way. Immense movement, as of Funamanje, Sunday Sikal, Sikelama data. You are expected to respond in your own street, and that is the message. We do have Ulu, the Chief Executive Officer, yes, and I trust Dr. Tulu, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Prof. Good morning.
Dr. Tulu, are you there?
I'm here, Prof. Good morning.
Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the Program Director, Professor Lechesa, the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the Honorable Lechesa Tsenoli, the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honorable Sylvia Lucas, the Deputy Minister of Social Development, Umama Wetu, the Honorable Henrietta Bokhopane Zulu, Gauteng, MEC for Social Development, Ms. Morakane Mosupio, Chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders, Ikosi Mahlangu, and all traditional leaders present, Siyabingelela Ngokuhlonipha, to the Chairperson of the Men's Sector, Mr. Ndando Yola, and all the leadership of the Sanat Men's Sector at all levels, all stakeholders of the Taguwani Re'ime movement, our development partners, in particular UN Women, Ms. Members of the media, esteemed guests and delegates, Sanbonani, good morning. My name is Dr. Tembisile Kulu, and I am the CEO of the South African National AIDS Council. Every opportunity to address men is an opportunity that I cherish the most. Every single day, women complain about social ills that are propagated by men in society. Every day, women and children live in fear. Every day, the elderly and other vulnerable people live in fear. Barely a week goes by without a headline involving a woman that has suffered some form of abuse in the hands of a man. Quite often, and that man is usually someone who is intimately connected to that woman. We live in a very scary society where fathers rape their own daughters and sons rape their own mothers. Earlier this month, the nation woke up to the harrowing news of a 53-year-old woman whose body was found inside a pit toilet buried there. The suspect is her 30-year-old son. What could possibly drive a youngster of 30 years to kill his own mother? In fact, why would anybody commit such a despicable thing? However, we are here today, and dreadful as things may seem, there is a glimmer of hope in the horizon. The horrors that we witness do not constitute an insurmountable challenge. We shall overcome. How so, you ask? Because the men of South Africa have decided to take a stand and to be counted. Those men are with us today. Those men are in the streets of South Africa. The next step is for us as women to walk hand in hand with these men to ensure that we arrest the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa. It's about time. The men of South Africa need us as allies so that our collective response to gender-based violence and femicide is informed, targeted, inclusive, and thorough. Women have been leading the gender-based violence and femicide conversation for far too long. It's time to amalgamate. It's also time to encourage and support the men to lead the fight, since the perpetrators are their peers. We also need to recognize that in order for women to work effectively alongside men in the country's quest to address the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide, we must confront the elephant in the room, and that is patriarchy. Granted, the women of South Africa are a force to be reckoned with. However, they continuously have to fight social and structural barriers that make it harder for them to realize their full potential. Patriarchy protects men and compromises women. We are cognizant of the reforms which are taking shape in various settings to affirm women's roles in our society. A case in point is what we have witnessed eNdlunkulu yaKwaZulu emva kokukhothama kwesilo samabandla iNkosi uGoodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu. The appointment of one of the queens, uNdlunkulu Manfombi kaSobhuza, to act as a regent in the interim is a step in the right direction. Ubukhosi baKwaZulu has always been one of the most influential in our lifetime. Their decision to affirm the role of a woman in social cohesion endeavors will undoubtedly go a long way in breaking down the walls of patriarchy that encroach us as women. Women must be treated as present and active partners in the response, and not just as victims who need to be pitied. Once this fundamental issue is out of the way, only then can we begin to talk about a truly inclusive multi-sectoral response. Multi-sectoralism as an ideology cannot be limited to just entities. It should consider gender dynamics, otherwise we are just wasting time. Toxic masculinity thrives when we sweep things under the carpet and pretend that all is well. The magnitude of gender-based violence in South Africa requires a comprehensive approach. The prevalence of TB and HIV in South Africa is a crisis. To top it all, we are now in the middle of a new pandemic. Enye inkinga ebesingazange siyiplanele. Yasifica sibhizi sisazama ukubhula umlilo we-HIV ne-TB. It is against this backdrop that I say we have no choice but to be multi-sectoral in our approach. An effective response to our challenges cannot be led by one entity or one sector of society, and we've always known that isolated interventions that are implemented in silos are counterproductive. SANAC is currently engaged in a rigorous exercise to strengthen the AIDS councils from the provincial level to the ward level, and these structures are key to coordinating the implementation of the NSP for TB, HIV, and STIs. As the program of action by the men's sector prevails and gains momentum, we hope that all the AIDS councils will be functioning optimally to ensure a smooth implementation of all the program interventions. The men's sector structure and all stakeholders of Takuwani Reime men's movement should be active participants in the AIDS councils in order to effectively marshal men's programs. We also need them for accountability and commitment to the cause. The Takuwani Reime men's response movement has made significant strides in its young history. Since its launch in 2015 and the subsequent men's summit, which was held in Durban in 2018, the movement has managed to galvanize men from all corners of the country and from all walks of life. The provincial reports, which were presented at the Men's Parliament in November last year, were impressive to say the least. Once again, these milestones could not have been possible were it not for our current multi-sectoral approach, where all stakeholders play their role, and the key driver is shared leadership and shared responsibility. I therefore submit, Program Director, that the only way for bold program action by the men's sector to work is to ensure that all stakeholders and structures are galvanized to rally behind the efforts of Takuwani Reime responsive men's movement. A truly multi-sectoral agenda will enable the movement to tell a good story at the next biennial Men's Parliament in 2023. As SANAC, we commit ourselves to rally behind the efforts and to offer support. You can count on us. Our hopes lie on this movement to tackle the following, to mention but a few: HIV prevention, TB in men, toxic masculinity, the socialization of the boy child, and gender-based violence and femicide. A lot of the groundwork has been done. It is now up to all of us to work collectively towards the attainment of the ultimate goal, which is to create a better South Africa for all and to create a thriving society where all of us as men and women live together in harmony. I thank you, Program Director.
Thank you. Permission to take off my mask for 1 minute. Yes. Thank you very much. Deputy Minister of Social Development, my sister, Honorable Henriette, a real soldier, really, in this work. We've seen you fight this battle everywhere, all the time. The MEC for Gauteng Social Development, Honorable Murakami Musukuya, who has just left us. The Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, my big brother, Honorable Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honorable Sylvia Lucas, Chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders, Nkosisi Mahlangu, Chairperson of the Men's Sector, Mr. Ntanda Yola, Secretary General of the Men's Sector, Mulelo Diasi, Professor, my brother, and the men's sector, the entire men's sector with whom we're working. And we just heard really from our CEO of SANAC, who is also leading gallantly in this work. I want to acknowledge you as well this morning. And thank you to and I almost want to do the same. What do you say to the men? My daughter. My daughter. My daughter. With that voice. With that voice. My daughter. My daughter. I speak here in my capacity as the head of UN Women and a key partner of the men's sector, but also the entire United Nations, because I think today is my turn, another day it will be my brother from UNAIDS, somebody from UNFPA, under the leadership of Leonardo Spekele Thomas. We are in full support, and all of us, one way or the other, very much as men in the men's sector. So thank you to SANAC for the invitation and for the men's sector. I really want to congratulate you on this amazing work and the movement. And I really think that for us, we want to take the story of Takawani Lime across the world, not just to leave it here. This is not just about South Africa, but also to show how this work started in dealing with HIV, but ultimately we're going to get to the root of this issue of patriarchy. So not just talking about patriarchy, but we're actually doing something else. And so congratulations for this work. A recent evaluation from UNAIDS recently on the HIV/AIDS epidemic flagged 4 big areas of concern. And in those 4 areas, they identified the dual war of gender-based violence, of gender inequality, as 2 of the 4 main things that need to be dealt with if we're going to deal with HIV in the long term. And so we know this story, and because UNAIDS' strategic plan for the next 5 years will focus on ending inequality. So the issue of inequalities is with us in a big way. Last year was 25 years since the Beijing platform. And I always tell the story about how in 1995 I was working in the UN in Eswatini. And to my benefit with Dr. Shogwe is my partner, so it benefited from Eswatini. But I tell the story of Eswatini. And I'm saying this because when we were there, we were preparing the entire women's movement at the time to go to Beijing, right? If you remember, I don't know if many of you are young enough to remember Beijing, but in 1995, 40,000 women from all over the world convened in Beijing to put on the table the first blueprint of what it would take in Europe. But what actually emerged is that whenever people, women said, no, I'm going to a meeting, or I'm traveling, or I'm doing something that men didn't appreciate, what did they say? Beijing. Don't bring Beijing to us. And I remember the issue of Beijing became such a big issue that it became a swear word at that time. Beijing. Don't talk about Beijing. So, but we laid forward 12 areas that we felt were crucial to transform gender equality. 25 years later, when we look back, there are some areas we've made advances. But as you said in the comments about leaving men behind and young boys behind in particular, we've made significant progress in girls' education, significant progress in discriminatory law, fewer discriminatory laws than there were in the past. We've made significant progress in areas such as maternal mortality. Less women die when they give birth across the world. So we've made progress, but we have a lot of work to do. And those include lagging behind so far that we are now saying that we are 257 years behind gender equality if we want to ever achieve that. To be able to do that, we actually have committed and signed, and Deputy Minister, I'm sure you were there in New York with people's SDGs in 2015. And we said by 2030, we will achieve the following in terms of HIV, in terms of poverty, in terms of gender inequality, right? So 2030 is the expiration, which means that those 20 years that we have to achieve gender equality, we must shrink to 9 years. We have 9 years for the expiration of gender inequality. We have 9 years to ending HIV. And so our actions cannot be as we've been doing now, taking a step at a time, a meeting here, a meeting there, a conversation here, a conversation. I think this is what I'm hearing. It is for us to accelerate in everything that we do. And so UN Women Globally has now convened a major campaign called Generation Equality, because we want to achieve this equality. So you'll hear us talking about this generation equality. It is a multi-stakeholder platform. It's a platform that is not just government, but it's civil society. And so we want we want the men's sector to join the generation equality campaign so that we do indeed work together. And so yesterday, in fact, we concluded the first forum in Mexico, and there are 7 areas that have been identified, and I'm just going to read them out quickly, that have unfinished business. Gender-based violence, top of the list. Economic justice and rights. Bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. Climate justice. Feminist movement and leadership. Technology and innovation. We saw how young women and girls everywhere were struggling to connect to, whether it's to university, to education, to markets, to opportunity. And then the issue of women, peace and security. We did research. Every country in the world produced reports on what is enabling progress or preventing challenges in terms of this gender equality issue. And one issue emerged that actually is persistent and pervasive everywhere. And that's the issue of patriarchy, of misogyny, of social norms, of stereotypes that are persistent. So we may do great and have a fantastic policy. And South Africa is one country that has been able to demonstrate that women can lead. Nobody questions anymore whether a woman can be a minister of defense, or a woman can be a minister of intelligence, or whether a woman can lead us as a CEO, or as a Speaker of Parliament. This has become normalized, right? Right? But let's talk about how that translates into the real lives and opportunities and resources for every woman and girl in all their diversity to access in this country. So we've got the women leaders and we've got male leaders, and we're pushing for that. And that's a big step that we've had South Africa. South Africa also has amazing progressive policies. And you have, I think, at 88%, you have about 12% policies that contribute discriminatory, according to our studies, that we are working with you on to make sure we see the end of. And the gaps in these discriminatory laws are that where you have a policy such as land, right? We have a policy that enables all women to own land. But on the other hand, you have traditional or laws that complexify how women access land. And it differs from one province to the next. Where in some province, And I know when we were living in Eswatini, and for Eswatini, I learned just before I got married, thank God, just before I got married, I learned that as soon as I get married, I would immediately become a legal minor. And I would not have been able to access land without my husband's signature. So this still happens. Sometimes the law may not say that, but the practice is different. And so what we have to do is to get to the issue of practice, of stereotypes, of norms and beliefs and tradition and culture and attitudes. And when people say that this is tradition, I always say, you know, South Africa is such a wonderful story because it is in this very country, the Zulu nation under Shaka Zulu, in the middle of war, changed your culture. I mean, for me, coming from where I come from in my country, the thought that a man would not be circumcised is absolutely scandalous. And it was scandalous for the Zulu people before, right? But that changed because it didn't work for the moment. So culture changes. Culture is not something that's immovable. But of course, we use culture to benefit us. For those who are the holders of culture, culture benefits us. So we have to be able to challenge that. And so in the work that we've been doing with men, we established globally a platform, a campaign, a program that we call He for She. And He for She was to say, we cannot walk this journey of gender equality on our own. And so we actually are called the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment. So it's not just about women. And so the He for She campaign became a global campaign to invite men in solidarity with women for us to change the game. And I'll talk a little bit about how we've done this and how we've been able to really show change using this platform for He for She. On gender, on GBV and HIV, one of the big things that for us emerged, and we've done research, is the way violence has been normalized. And we have many stories. If we had time, I'd tell you many stories of men who feel that it is their responsibility to abuse a woman, to beat a wife, to discipline a wife. It's normalized. Am I speaking to myself? It's true, right? It's normalized, right? So we have to find a way to abnormalize it. It cannot be that we accept this as a normal culture. It is not normal. In fact, I have a research piece that I found the other day from a woman in Kenya who did research from 250 years ago on gender-based violence within that community. That community is a Bantu community, so I guarantee you that tradition is the same in every traditional culture in South Africa. And that policy states, that research shows that actually 250 years ago, a woman was assumed, if there was a case of violence, a woman was assumed to be correct. The burden of proof did not sit on her to prove that the man abused her. In fact, immediately there was disciplining of the man, right? And so these are the things that we have to challenge is how do we take back our streets? How do we take back this bystander culture where men will stand and watch a situation of abuse as if it's a normal thing?
And I quite it also.
Yeah. So the He for She work, we began to invest, partner with the Catholic Church, ironically, just, I say this just because for a long time in the world, the Catholic Church was seen as, too conservative, right? But in this instance, the power of the church to reach every corner of society and then have justice and peace programs that want to actually go in and change the game for the community became for us such a powerful tool. And so in working with them, we've been working with them at two levels. The first level is changing the behavior of men, working with men in taverns where men gather, working with men in taverns, working with men in their stockfields where they gather, working with men even in their churches, working with men, including on HIV, to say, can we work with men for them to go and get tested, for them to go and take their ARVs so that we actually are able to save more families because of the decisions that men are taking. And we saw using HIV as a proxy indicator, we actually have seen massive transformation in the behavior and choices that men were making. And so what we started to do really is push this program to start changing attitudes, changing men. And in the taverns, they've changed the culture within that tavern, changed the choices that they're making, changed the way that the tavern runs, what time the tavern closes, you know, really beginning to shift the game. The second area was looking at the economic benefit and economic opportunities for the young women who very often are the most impacted by relations with men, especially transactional relationships. You know that HIV is caused amongst young women mostly by older men with young women, right? And it's transactional because of power and money. Remember the Lechesa story? And so South Africa has conducted research that has shown that if you want to change this GBV and HIV story, two things need to happen. You combine the attitudes of men with economic opportunity. And when you bring these two together, you actually are able to see results. And we saw a dramatic transformation in behavior when this happened. So in a program that we support with the SACBC Justice and Peace Program called Young Women for Life, these young women who are all over the country, who really have every single form of discrimination that they have to live with, HIV, GBV survivor, poverty, etc. Working with these women, were able to start identifying economic opportunities for them to take on so that they can actually make the choice to drop a mesa. So that's really looking at how do we take back the community and society? How do we make sure that every one of these men who's in this room and in the room in Parliament, that you know what's happening on the street? That on your street there's no abuse. We have a program and we work with impact leaders, he for she impact leaders. We work with faith-based organizations. And in the work with the faith-based organizations, one of the things is to say that every single church or faith, and I mean church in its broader sense, it's not just the Christian church, but the church, Islamic church, Jewish, every church, that they are able to know where there is violence in their parish or in their community or in their congregation, in their community that they serve. Know it, just like we did with anti-apartheid. We used to look across the world at South Africa and think, wow, they're really taking control of the streets. So with the Impact Champions, we've been able to pull an Africa-wide program called the COTLA program. It's a Congress of African Traditional Leaders. And those Congress of African Traditional Leaders have taken the decision, and I'm glad that the National House of Traditional Leaders is with us, have taken the decision to come together to change gender inequality in their communities. And because of that, they have made decisions. One of the decisions that has been made in Malawi to annul early child marriages. Marriage of 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, unacceptable. 30,000 young girls have been sent back to school, marriages annulled in Malawi. The Sunni Muslims have made decisions, no more child marriage amongst them, and no FGM in many communities, female genital mutilation. So in South Africa, we still have Ukutwana. We still have traditions, and we've been receiving reports during COVID of young girls who are being sold in exchange for money. So we need traditional leaders to take on that really and change the acceptance, the normalization of that practice in that community. But I say the same for Parliament, since we're speaking to Parliament. Everyone parliamentary leader in their constituents has got to take back that constituency. And we need a competition, perhaps, where we identify which community is the worst and what are the leaders in that community doing, and hold them accountable and support them to change what happens ward by ward, ward by ward. We are doing that for HIV, we're doing that for COVID. Why can't we do that for GBV and HIV? And final comment is about resources and money. And I'm so happy that we have the Deputy Speaker with us, Deputy Speakers with us, because this has been budget season. Is there any budget that has passed without a strong gender budget? And I say this because if we're going to change opportunities and resources for young women and girls everywhere, we have got to put the money behind our mouths. We cannot say, yes, we are for gender equality, and then our budgets are not saying that. And I don't mean, first and foremost, let me just say that the Department of Women's Budget, and I say about them because we say this about all women's ministries everywhere in the world, are always under-resourced. Always under-resourced. But on top of that, you find that department by department by department, you have small budgets. And when we did analysis, we found that the budgets are set aside only for Women's Month activities. So these are small events here and there. Of course, we know that with our sister here in social development, the investment is significant because of the kind of work that you do. But what about, I don't know, transport, mines, human settlements, public works, and I'm just calling out departments. In Uganda, they have made a decision. No budget goes to Parliament without a certificate of compliance with the gender budget rules. So everybody has got to comply. When it gets to Parliament, Parliament audits gender budgets to make sure, all budgets, to make sure that they're complying with gender. And so as we look at the issue of decision-making for women and how women access more opportunities and resources and are able to access real opportunity for us to be able to fight this issue of GBV and HIV in our societies, those are the indicators of how we're doing on gender equality. We have to jump on this bandwagon of generation equality, along with the movement of Takawanya, and really drive acceleration of actions in ways that will compress the 200 years into the 9 years that are left behind for us. Thank you for the partnership. Oh, I'm even leaving it.
Thank you very much, UN Women. Fortunately, we will be working with you this year and next year. We'll be conducting dialogues throughout the country, especially in GBV hotspots. So there is a documentation around this, and we really appreciate your support. Without wasting time, colleagues, I just want to mention to those who are watching at home that today we are launching Men's Parliament Program Plan of Action 2020-2022. And if possibly you are running out of your data, you can just tune in on your TV, channel 408 or Gagasi FM. Without wasting time, last year we issued a statement in Parliament. And our statement was very clear. In fact, it's an apology. We issued an apology to all women of South Africa to say that we are really sorry and ashamed ngezinto ezenzeka ezimpilweni zabo omama labantwana. And today we want to action our apology by ensuring that we go to communities, but not as a vigilante groups, just to go to communities and engage men, because our engagements are more effective when, as men, we talk to each other, because we understand each other and we know where these criminals. And we know people are terrorizing society, they are intervents, Basemakaya, who are also hiding rapists in our own homes. So we know exactly what needs to be done moving forward. Let me call upon our mother, the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Umama Wetu Comrade Sylvia Lucas, to engage us.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good morning to everyone. Oh, I don't know whether there is a bit of an echo, but I will continue. Good morning to everyone. Let me first acknowledge the Program Director, continuing with the protocols of the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Lechesa Tsenoli, the Deputy Minister of Social Development, our sister, my sister in any case, Henrietta Pohopane Zulu, the MEC for Social Development of Gauteng Province, the Chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders, President of SALVA, and the representative for United Nations Women South Africa, leadership of the main sector, honorable delegates. Once again, we meet in this very important venture that all of us have agreed to commit ourselves to. Let me extend sincere appreciation to the entire leadership of the main sector, but also to the Deputy Minister that is consistent in making sure that we address the issues that we are addressing together with Parliament. And I really want to express my appreciation that I've been afforded the opportunity to deliver on one of the most significant challenges that is currently facing our country. And besides the COVID-19 pandemic seemingly becoming another pandemic, and that is the issue of gender-based violence and femicide. I must also acknowledge that the speakers before me, particularly our representative of United UN Women, have said a lot about the topic, or about the issues or the actions and the policies and the principles that need to inform our action on the issues of gender-based violence, femicide, and particularly gender inequality, something that is also very close to our hearts. And I want to agree that South Africa still also, like the rest of the world, have got a long way to go, and particularly our continent, to be able to address the issue of gender equality. Currently, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, using 2015 data, they found South Africa to be having one of the highest murder rates in the world. And within that, we also have a femicide rate that is 5 to 6 times the world average. The AU Agenda 2063 identifies gender-based violence as a major obstacle to human security, peace, and development, often fueled by armed conflict, terrorism, extremism, and intolerance. At the level of the continent, the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa brings to the forefront the need to eliminate gender-based violence. From the global, continental, and regional level, there is consensus that gender-based violence is profound and it's widespread. It is impacting on almost every aspect of life. Gender-based violence and femicide is systematic and deeply entrenched in institutions, cultures. We've been hearing about the cultural practices that is existing and the traditions in the country. Gender power inequality rooted in patriarchy is the primary driver of gender-based violence. It pervades the political, economic, and social structures of society and is driven by strongly patriarchal social norms and complex and intersectional power inequalities, including those of gender, race, class, and sexuality. Gender-based violence is a human rights violation with major social developmental impact for survivors of violence, as well as families, communities, and societies. On the economic level, the NDP and Vision 2030 sets forth our country's plan for economic transformation, poverty eradication, and full employment. Not only is gender-based violence and femicide resulting in wasted resources that could be used towards the National Development Plan and a productive economic growth, the significant investment made by government and private sector to grow the South African economy will be eroded as long as the prevalence of violence against women prevails. In short, gender-based violence erodes both the input and output of growth. Distinguished guests, addressing gender-based violence and femicide is a very complex issue, requiring multifaceted responses and commitments from all of us, from all stakeholders, including our government as well as social society. So what needs to be done? And that is what I just want to make some proposals, because this is exactly the issue of how do we collectively end as a end in terms of governance, make sure that we address the issues that is needed to address the specific pandemic or challenge that is existing. A multi-sectoral approach is needed that will harness the roles, responsibilities, resources, and commitment across government. We will also need to develop a visionary, gender-responsive, and transformative approach that takes account of inequality and the differences that is existing, particularly gender differences. We need to advocate for a human rights-based, victim-centered, survivor-focused approach. We need to bring gender-based violence clinical services to lower-level health facilities. Just the other day, we read in the social media as well as in the mainstream media about the absence of clinical testing because there is no forensic kits available at different levels. So we need to improve access to make sure that services are brought closer to communities and particularly in our rural areas. We have been, if we speak about the backlog in terms of gender inequality, what about the backlog of making sure that all at an equal basis have got access to services? People particularly in rural areas, have been struggling over the years and are still deprived of services that can really bring equality. And I like the word that the Deputy Speaker used, an egalitarian society. We will need to strengthen the national gender machinery structures. We will also have to incorporate a gender perspective into the design, development, adoption and execution of all budgetary processes is appropriated. And I think it was covered by what our representative of UN Women just said, that it is always budgetary constraints, it is always resource constraints that don't assist us to address the issues of gender-based violence and other issues with regards to gender equality and women. And we need to make sure that there is appropriation that will promote equitable, effective, and appropriate resource allocation. It is imperative that civil society organizations ensure that accurate, reliable, and meaningful data, because there is also an issue of not existing reliable data on violence against women and children is being collated. There is an urgent need for civil society organizations also to enhance their own data collection, their own data analysis, and the dissemination and utilization of synthesized data to inform decision making. Women in South Africa generally have a higher unemployment rate than men. Additionally, women struggle to ascertain livelihoods outside formal employment. It is worth noting that Black African women are the most vulnerable. We have said since many years ago that the face of poverty is the face of a Black African woman. So that is why we've seen that there is an extended unemployment rate of more than 30% amongst Black African women. More worrying is that 4 out of 10 young females aged 15 to 34 are not in employment, education, or training, or what they called in the need group. This exacerbates the vulnerability context across all ages. Females consistently record a higher head count. However, they remain behind in social, political, economic, and cultural matters. To amplify this, Stats SA reports that 39.2% of female-headed households in South Africa do not have a single employed member. Stats SA further reported that the prevalence of physical and sexual violence decreased with the wealth quintile. In other words, the higher the wealth or income, the lower the prevalence of gender-based violence. I don't know, is it really reliable statistics, but that is what we have got in the report that we got from Stats SA. Over and above all this, the bigger question is, how do we overcome and address the vulnerability of women? Collectively, we will need to hold the state accountable to do the following. Establish adequate budgetary allocation to support gender equality and development programs that enhance women empowerment. Advancing the focus on macroeconomic issues and increasing advocacy capacity among women's organizations and those organizations patriotic to women's causes. Gender disaggregated data should be requested both from Treasury as well as departments as well as local authorities like municipalities. Budgets should be clearly linked to gender equity outcomes, and this must be articulated by every department. There should be a strict focus on outcomes for women. And I believe if someone else can do something, we can just follow the best practice and implement the very same, like was reported by the former speaker. The land expropriation process must be gender biased, and women land ownership will need to be prioritized. Distinguished delegates, this meeting must assist us to activate a process of sustained and structured engagement, solidified in an institutionalized oversight program. We must be able to review all laws enhancing gender transformation. We must also convene provincial and districts coordinating summits to assess and strengthen the cohesion and functionality of the national gender machinery. In conclusion, as the Nigerian poet Ben Okri once said, and I quote, "We have not yet arrived, but at every point at which we stop requires a redefining of our destination," close quote. We need a society to get into a habit of always analyzing our situation for the betterment of humankind as we fundamentally relook at society from the point of view of the high levels of gender-based violence and femicide and the coronavirus pandemic upon us. Good governance has to be a key priority. We cannot be static in the face of change. We have to continuously adapt in order to ensure that governance is effective. We need an agile governance if we are serious in defeating the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide. We need a governance that is adaptive, human-centered, inclusive, and sustainable policy making, which acknowledge that policy development is no longer limited to government, but rather is an increasingly multi-stakeholder effort. This year, as Parliament as well as government, we have set aside to commemorate the life and times of Charlotte Maxeke. As we think about the challenges that women are currently facing, we must do so in remembrance of women like Charlotte Maxeke, the matriarch and activist for gender rights. She challenged the status quo during a time when the social, political, and legislative landscape was defined by discriminatory norms and traditions, and more so for women. During that time, patriarchy was rife and deeply entrenched. Furthermore, the brute force of colonialism and land dispossessions created an acrimonious atmosphere where the identity and voice of Africans was forcefully undermined and diminished. Additionally, African norms of patriarchy also denied women the right to speak and be heard. The stark reality was that women had no place in spaces of leadership and activism. Despite these limiting beliefs, Ma'am Maxeke made a formidable contribution towards shifting entrenched levels of patriarchy and racial segregation. She showed fortitude and courage by daring to challenge the socio-political system that she was born into. It is therefore upon us, as this generation, to discover our mission, fulfill it or betray it in relative opacity, bearing in mind that men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. As we continue to forge the struggle against gender-based violence and femicide, and to continue to face contradictions which will seek to derail our revolution, may we not disappoint our matriarch Charlotte Maxeke, and may we build on the trajectory that the men has decided to take at this juncture. And I'm very cautious to call my daughter because I grew up in an environment where someone begin to say "in daughter," then it is very toxic and very negative. So I hope that the use of this slogan will make sure that we see a positive trajectory with regards to the issues where men have committed themselves to support us and to take us forward. Let me thank you, Program Director. Thank you very much.
Deputy Chair of XOP, in fact, we amended this slogan. We used to say "Insimbi," but in order. And then we had to analyze the Insimbi parts. Are we not enforcing masculinities and all that? So we'll continue to amend. Daughter. Daughter. My daughter. Thank you so much, Deputy of the NCOP. Colleague, without wasting time, I would like to call upon the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Comrade Lechesa Tsenoli. Unfortunately, this time around, Deputy Speaker, when we are in Parliament, you are in charge there. And today you are in charge. We can't do exercises, you know. When you are in Parliament, we always request men to wake up in the morning and move around Cape Town with you. This time, we are managing you via Zoom. Over to you, Deputy Speaker.
When your body moves, your brain grooves. When your body moves, your brain grooves. Thank you very much, Dr. Jasi, Program Director. I really feel glad and awkward having to be speaking online this way. And but the circumstances are such that we have to do it. I regret that I couldn't from the beginning be connected. I had some difficulties that I still don't understand, which don't often happen, if I may put it that way. But ultimately, I was able to connect and only hear the UN representatives speak. If I repeat things that have been said before by others, I hope you will assume it's a point of emphasis. And if I say things that they haven't said, that's a departure, but in the general same trajectory of things. Let me put it this way. We welcome all of our special guests today, all the men in our personal and representative capacity. For this moment, we have requested you to step aside briefly from your usual systems you live in daily, so that collectively as men, accompanied by some of our partners, not all of them are here today, we continue our reflection on patriarchy, its roots, its impact, and what to do effectively to destroy it. All this we do too in search of reasons for these unacceptable levels of gender-based violence and femicide. The intention is not just to understand what leads to it, but as a result, to take effective action to build a responsive men's movement to drive an intergenerational effort for a society free of violence. It's not just the short-term dramatic things that call on us. In other words, the squeaky wheel that gets the oil, but we must look at the long term so that what we do today removes in the roots the source of the problems that we are dealing with. In Parliament, we agreed with you to convene biannually to measure progress, identify challenges, and map our next steps. And the program director referred to the reasons we are meeting here today as our next steps. We took a decision beforehand in Parliament too, learning from our past experience, to stop event-driven programs, but to urgently address the problems, recognizing their relatedness, their interconnectedness, pooling our resources as institutions, as organizations, and as individuals. We did that so that we do not mark time, stomping on the same spot, not knitting together the valuable strands and insights that unite us, ensuring that we communicate and act effectively across our usual boundaries. For example, this work cut across the youth, women, workers, and inside so-called civil society, which include business and religious organizations, political parties. So Parliament, as a platform for debating public issues, needs to integrate these matters arising from here into its many different portfolio and select programs, into its relationship and programs with other parliaments, such as in the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, Interparliamentary Union, and we do so in the rest of the world as well, working together with the executive arm as represented here by Deputy Minister Bohupanizu in the international relations. So reversing patriarchal behavior and conduct and its often tragic consequences cannot be isolated into or pigeonholed into any department or single area. We must consciously seek out and expose factors that support and or are based on inferior, superior assumptions about race, class, or gender. This factor found in our homes, in sports fields, in business practices, in trade unions, in religious organizations, early childhood facilities, how we train our kids, schools, universities, and essentially also largely in the socio-economic system that dominates our country, continent, and the world. When we have done our dreams, vision of a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, prosperous, and hopefully, Deputy Chair, egalitarian society will be realized. Let me perhaps at this moment say that working with the Deputy Chair, we've just completed it's almost completed a process to review the Women's Charter, which is relevant to our discussions here. And in doing so, we worked with partners such as the Statistics South Africa, so that we know these problems in their numbers. We worked with the Commission on Gender Equality, whose principal mandate is to create this equality as envisaged in our constitution. And we worked with the Finance and Fiscal Commission, whose principal agenda is to ensure that the allocation of resources for institutions of governments are meaningful. And one of those agendas in this course of reflecting on the Women's Charter and its implementation was a consistent call for a gender sensitive, gender responsive budgeting process. And they presented to us research which was conducted to pilot this. What were the lessons that were drawn from that exercise to ensure that the allocation of resources indicate their responsiveness and sensitivity to the problems we are confronting in society objectively. And so this is an area which confronts Parliament itself and its budgeting in its own business. And so officials of Parliament and ourselves who oversee the processes working towards that problem. Of course, we invited human women to collaborate with us in this matter to help us provide not both technical and lessons of other places in the world where these programs are implemented and the effects they are having as part of the motivation and learning from the experience of others. We are not living in an isolation. Like I said at the beginning, we live in systems all over the place, and our interconnectedness needs to be surfaced every time. And one of those areas is this area of resource allocation and its sensitivity, responsiveness to the problems we are talking about. We hope that the meeting today and its follow-up as we go deeper will build on these aspirations. As I said in my earlier comment, that when we are done, we should, as we do it now, hope that in future generations to come will see the value of what was done in the interest of creating a society that recognizes women and girls as equal to men and young men, children, so that we, in the sense of being human beings at the center of what we are saying, that's what it is. Our humaneness is in our sense, in our hands to recreate. There are factors that militate against it. Let's identify those and act decisively against them. The more we develop ways of measuring our progress, the better. And thank you very much, Program Director, and the organizers from Takalani Rime. We really appreciate this, led and supported by the Department of Social Development, led by Deputy Minister Bokopane Zulu. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Deputy Speaker, I saw you the other day on TV struggling with this campaign, Takuane Ime. It's Takuane Ime, not Takalani. Takuane
You must blame the deputy chair for not schooling me appropriately.
You are selling me out now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly.
No, not you, the deputy chair of Takawani Rime. He is the one who should do that.
Okay, we'll summon him to a meeting. Thank you very much, colleagues. We don't want to waste time because after this session, there is another session for Gauteng organizations work with men and boys. We are going to have a closed session where we'll be debating serious issues off camera. Now, allow me to call the representative on the Bezita from the National House of Traditional Leaders. Bayeti. I hope they are ready online. National House of Traditional Leaders, are you there? National House of Traditional Leaders, are you there? Fortunately, we are about to sign an MOU with the National House of Traditional Leaders. We'll be visiting all 882 traditional councils in this country. So this men's movement is over rural areas, traditional councils, engaging men at that level. House of Traditional Leaders, are you there? If not, we'll continue with our program. I don't know how to introduce our deputy minister. You know, she's very close to this movement. She's very close to this men's movement. Sihamba naye everywhere. And usticha nama tactics political. You know, when people don't want to give you money, deputy minister, usticha, you must continue. You must never postpone your activities, your programs where there's no money. Hence what I did. Hence why we decided not to respond this way. So, allow me to ask Jesus, Madoda, Madoda, Madoda.
Ngiyabonga mfundisi. Angithi ngidabeni la. Let me acknowledge the Deputy Chair and the Deputy Speaker, and acknowledge my sister Anne. Thank you for joining us. And let me acknowledge Bondabezita. You must understand this, the village and connectivity mfundisi. You're not there yet, you know. And then I acknowledge the men. I think everybody has hammered the men, so let me be nice for today. And you know, when you work with men, you also learn that egos are real and fragile. So today I want to build the egos, because we need to, in the same strength you bear, but at the same time, acknowledge that since we started the Men and Boys Championing Change program, men are indeed changing. And I think that's important for all of us to acknowledge. So I have a few things that I want to say very briefly before Batwala entry and 4-1 disappear. I don't know, please, whether you've decided to suspend Paseka today and have a session. That is very comforting. But I think there's a number of things as we talk about the issues of gender equality. I'm always in trouble. So I just don't know how to say things politely, but I think for some of us it's a task we've been given. I always use my girls. I'm a mother of 3 girls. And by the way, today is the first day I've had a month of turning 50. I never knew 50 feels so great. So, and I want to thank all the men that celebrated me. We had a real 50th birthday roadshow, and from the 1st to the 31st. But I actually turned 50 on the 11th. So even yesterday, we still ate cake. So I think I need to go and never eat cake for another year. That's how much cake I've eaten. But thank you, South Africa, for celebrating. It felt good, and we really enjoyed it. There's a few things, as I said, that I want to talk to today. And I know between women and me, I'm going to be very slaughtered, but it's okay. All in a day's work. I think one of the lessons of sitting the hours in the company of men and listening to their real stories, it's always dawned on me. I'm going to choose, because Anne spoke very adequately about Beijing as a very, very young girl. I can never forget the Beijing drama. But also I can never forget the drama that followed the drama. You leave Beijing at the gate when you enter my house. You'll pick Beijing up tomorrow. And that was, you are right, we lived through that. I I think it's important for us in the same breath as we call for gender equality, as we call for the empowerment of women and dear daughters, we also become cautious and conscious that that should not displace men. One of the things that men have said in 100 times is, Deputy Minister, we're losing our dignity because we can't fund our children's education. We can't put food on the table. And one of the things I've learned is that an unemployed man is an angry one. It doesn't matter how many workshops you can workshop him. It doesn't matter how many meetings he can attend. It doesn't matter how many sessions he can have nomfundisi at the church. If we don't ensure that men begin to be economically empowered, some way without undermining the empowerment of women, we are going to have a problem.
Yes,
we're going to sit with this problem and we're all going to speak English. And the more men become unemployed and the more women become employed and the imbalance continue and the problems are going to be bigger. So let's find the balance. Let's find the balance. For us as social development, it's an emergency because as a department, we are the custodian of the policy on families. We're required to restore families, to strengthen families, to ensure positive parenting. But I can tell you, wow, we're not doing great. Precisely because, as Anne said, and as the Deputy Chairperson said, my dear sister, Sylvia, you find a female-headed household, nobody works. But it becomes even worse when the man in that male-headed household is disempowered. Because from Njago Gate. So you start fighting about things that normally you would not fight about. So for us, it's important as we establish where we can as a department, your cooperatives, because we don't fund individual companies or businesses. So I've encouraged men and Fundis in my 2 days a week. Can you find a way of working together? And I must be honest, we're not doing very well in that because men are not very responsive. I think the intersectionality between HIV, gender-based violence, poverty, it's a real one. We all want to get to zero. We want to get to zero new HIV infections. Hey, that's chicken, hey, the doll, hey, the whatever all the funny words we use. It's like the NDP 2030, SDG, and whatever other document. We still behaving the chickens. So now I'm out on a hunt. I'm looking for a very particular animal. Its name is a macho mobile man with money. So I want to call on men to help me find that animal. Because you see, that animal is a problem in my life. A very big problem. Because you see, this animal raped my girls. This animal beats up women. This animal just doesn't have peace. So for all South African men today, can we please together go on a hunt to look for this mobile macho man with money? We have no issues with his money, neither have we issues with his mobility, but we have issues with his macho. And I always say to men, guys, it's okay like us give me a lift. Mara sa mpotsa gore ke patale ka o bula maoto ne lift. Don't ask me for sex. Because as we build this men's movement, like Malcolm said, it's a behavioral change. It should be okay for Mfundisi to give the girls on their way to school as they trek K7 series high a lift, that they should be comfortable in this car and use that opportunity to say, girls, if you work hard at school, this car, or even a better one, will be yours. It should be okay. But have BM or this big car, we even actively teaching our dear daughters for yo, how about you what that but it shouldn't be like that. Because fatherhood, it's a very good feeling for the men I spend time with. The feeling you can't even buy anyway. Now, Dr. Hannah, we also acknowledge today as we launch this program going forward that the abuse of men is also increasing by women. So we must acknowledge that as well. Because you see, an unemployed man, oh, sorry, it's a headache. Or the whole day. Or there's no peace. So as women, we also becoming violent in this whole GBVF because we are frustrated by ourselves, by our peers, but we also have a new thing. We live for others. So me really, one deputy minister, really take it. But I want something. And that creates this collision, the push and the shove between us. And until we find the real space to be honest with each other, I already produced the masters, PhDs, research, trying to answer the same question. But the bottom line is communication remains the key. We raise angry boys. I made this comment once where I said women are raising angry boys. Yo, Azanga ka Twitter so. Koreka Twitter full time. Women were telling me where to get off. But the truth of the matter is, I work with boys. Mm-hmm. And when I work with boys, I listen to their pain. I listen to their stories. And I have to be their voice. So to the guys, you are making women raise angry boys by denying your own children. Can we please own up? You know, when you have sex and you choose not to use a condom, there's something that follows, guys, please. So can we not have this thing where we are trying to deal with boys and boys feel that they're gonna deal with you? I'm a district champion in the President District model champion for Amajuba District. And in Amajuba, there are 12-year-old boys. They call themselves, it's a gang now, last chances. They kill men and no one else. Their mission is to wait for you guys when you're drunk and they just murder you. So I had a session with them because I needed to understand for it. How does a 12-year-old become such a brutal murderer? And they gave me one answer, two. They said the first one is because our fathers deny us. We don't know who they are, so they are better off not there. So we'll just kill them. Now, how did we get there? And the second one, they said to me, Deputy Minister, talk to our mothers. We are tired of them because after we're done with these men, we're gonna go for them. And like, why guys? Oh, wait. They're like, because when you ask about your father is like a swear word. So it was sad for me to sit in that room. Very, very sad. I looked back and I said to them, you know, some of you are going to be my in-laws. You are going to ferry my girls. But I need to now work with these boys so that we deal with the anger before it becomes a real catastrophe. But when you look at this, it means men and women, we have an obligation. We have an obligation not to abuse each other. We have an obligation not to abuse our children. We have an obligation to find a way when we fall out of love, but there's products called children. How do we continue to be civil with each other? And parenting a child can never be about money. That is my humble request as we launch, now localizing this movement. Can you guys stop being ATMs? Stop throwing us with money. And you guys think when you paid maintenance and then you gave the woman money, it's enough. Your children don't want money. They want a relationship. And that's all they're asking for. A relationship. Noma ubaba angasebenzi. Akangiwalke nje kuye esikolweni. Asikhathele ibhola together. Asihlale phansi ngizokhuluma about my girls. Kuri rebele relationship. Hare kope thelete. Re kopa le. And le rata batho. Le lona hali enough. Hali sna presence. So to men of South Africa, can we reach out to our children? Because for us to win the war on gender-based violence and femicide, we need men and women to start coexisting so that we can have and work together to raise a South African that will inherit the South Africa we are all building. Otherwise, there's no point. These are the roadmaps, Madume, to add on what you said. Victim empowerment is a very important component of healing a nation. And we are a very angry nation. It's time we admit that. We are a very angry nation. And there's a lot of things we choose not to deal with. Mental health is becoming, go to South Africa, we are becoming a very good ground for pharmaceuticals. Whether it's on ARVs, now we are on psychiatric medication. Guys, hello. It's not okay. We cannot lead in all that which is wrong. And you look at men and women. You know, the alcohol bans taught me a lot about South Africans that I never knew. I never knew alcoholic. Yo! In my whole life, I've never had to stand and beg for alcohol to be opened because parents could not parent. They sat there on the couches, detoxing, having unsupervised and unable to look after their children. It got to a point where the calls on our child line was too much. And I said, Mr. President, you know what? Me, I don't have centers to remove children from their families. Just give them their alcohol so they can parent their children, I beg. So we need to deal with the issue of why we misuse and abuse alcohol. To the point where children go to bed hungry. That is amongst the things you must deal with. And I call it the victim syndrome. We've not addressed the impact of the migrant labor system because we never lived together. Ntate na ya di mining, mme a sala ko hae, or mme na ya di kitchen, ntate a ya di gardening. And we tend to think that the immediate and instant coexistence will just come with peace. No, we never coexisted. Our boys never witnessed what it means to be a man and to be a husband and to be a brother because they were raised by women. And now when he marries my daughter, he must be an instant husband. Where did he see this husband? Where did he see? But that's not an excuse. It says for the few men that I want to celebrate today, you have a bigger role to play. Create the change. Because Takuaneri Ime can be as active. They can institutionalize a responsive men's movement. But what are the men responding to? It's the next step. And that is why we took the decision to say, let's go and put it at the doorsteps of traditional councils. Because we all respect culture and the traditional leaders are the custodians of culture. We all respect them as a symbol of authority. I know you guys lost respect on us a long time ago, so we're not even gonna raise our hands, but we're here. But we know that traditional leaders stay. Even if that one human being can be a drunkard, whatever, the institution remains. So we're taking this program to that level. And as social development, we want to say, you have, by the way, so you're not this metro, you do have villages and you do have traditional leaders in Gauteng. But today we're launching a national program. And we're launching this program with a lot of pride because as social development, we have invested a lot of money in training the traditional leaders on social ills and social structural drivers. So we are going, Matume, to people that are ready to roll out and lead the behavioral change because we spend millions as social development to train each and every kings and queens and traditional and indunas. So we left no one as we went tribal council by tribal council by tribal council. And we stand here to say it can be done and it will be done. If we could do it in 24 months as a department to go to even the smallest tribal council to train them for 5 days on social and structural drivers, gender equality, HIV, you name it, whatever, so from drugs to alcohol to how they even should run their tribal courts, how they must respond when an orphan and a man and everything. So we launch this program today with a lot of pride because the people we are going to are ready to lead. Let me conclude by saying a few things. Matume, we request Emuruchi to the leadership of Takuaneri Ime on the week of the 12th to 15 April. They know I'm a bully, so they are used to being bullied, so that we can launch at the National House with the Social Development Committee, the outcome, Matume. At the House with them, they are in session from the 12th to the 15th. So one of those days, except the 12th, of course, can we go to the National House so that the 25 leaders that represents all of Amahosi can get a presentation from us. That's the first step. The second aspect is we will convene all of the NPOs across the country that are funded to run men's programs. Because unless we do that, we will not know how much we are all investing. Whilst the coordination structure has zero money, they didn't even get paid. They don't even have money for petrol to coordinate yourselves. So for coordinating yourselves, which I must be honest, I stand here and I'm very embarrassed. Because when men reach out and are ready to work, we don't deny them the money.
Sure.
It is not okay.
Thank you.
And the session that as the nation department, we give provinces the money to run these programs. The decision was taken for the behavioral change programs to be implemented by provinces. Don't ask me what they did. Me, I don't know. Tell no lies. That's me. I don't know. I get a report. I stand here. I don't know what happened. And I'm one person who admits upfront. But the National Department of Social Development's money was distributed to provinces. They received, I personally convened the MECs and HODs to brief them on social media. Personally, myself, me, as I stand here. So they know what is it that they are supposed to do. Whether it happened, it's another story. We also committing to say we've had our boys' assemblies. So the program of going to tribal councils that we're launching today, we are launching it alongside the district boys' assemblies because we need to talk to the boys and that they are not left behind. The last one that I need to talk to is we would like to make available the spaces in social development in communities for men to meet. On the Saturday, that crash, that beautiful crash that we've built must be a hype of activities for men. But we are busy rolling out men's lounges. We committed to employing male social workers, and I wish to confirm that we've done 11 already, and we have employed the male social workers, and they are already very successful programs. And where the lounges are, GBVF is beginning to go down. Families are beginning to be restored, and communities are beginning to benefit. So we've tested it, it works, and we will work very hard to launch more safe spaces for men, where we know that when you go there, you can speak, you can be put together, and you can find your way wherever you lost it, and be that decent, amazing, super human being you were meant to be.
Yes.
So that you can protect us, you can love us, you can stand for us, but you can also restore South Africa. As women, we've done pride, we've stripped, we've marched, we've done everything you can think of. For us to get to zero of everything that is bad in society, the responsibility lies with South African men. Thank you very much.
Matota. Matota.
Those who are online, we are still just want to acknowledge you, especially other UN agencies, UNAIDS and UNICEF. I'm also told that we are also in the South African Council of Churches, represented by Pastor Lulama Njingwa. We acknowledge you. There are a lot of organizations working with men also attending today. We really appreciate your presence. In this room, we do have provincial secretaries of the men. Eastern Cape, represented by Comrade Mawetu, Zita, and Atemalite Godfrey from Limpopo. They've transported themselves to come here. to show which men of South Africa are serious. Whether you find we'll convene ourselves, we'll mobilize ourselves everywhere in the country. So thank you very much, colleagues, honoring this event. Cape Town, we are done. Where is Ngomane? Ngomane will do vote of thanks, but we'll do this in this fashion. We're going to have Mr. Ngomane. Yes, basic briefing. So to we come here. We need workshops as well. One beginning must train us. Okay, we're going to have vote of thanks by Mr. Ngomane Yena, or representative Gauteng Social Development, Chief Director, Social Development. See, amended a bit. We're going to have Mr. Mukwena. I'm sure some of us, some Kumbula, Uncle the late Karabo, may her soul rest in peace. He also represented the entire men's movement. So a vote of thanks will be done by two people. And then later, comrade Sichaba Rantako, Uzosivalela, this historical event. After Zotolu Urza, not those who are online, Tina here. Zotolu Urza. After food, we come back and debate. Okay. So it's like one.
Madoda. eGauteng ngizonifundisa ukuthi senza kanjani yabo. So that even those who are not here in Gauteng will realize that no, indeed, Gauteng, you want me to take it off for 2 minutes? Oh. I want to wait and see what you put on my step. But if I get permission from you, leadership, I'm okay. And we believe that what we are doing as men's movement in the country, Deputy Minister and all delegates, that we shall be victorious, that our commitments, our pronouncements, and our efforts will lead in us being victorious. We will see what you are investing in. So that's why we say victory is ours. Victory is ours. Victory is ours. I want to tell you, there is a victory sign that every man must show. You know, if a boxer has won in a boxing ring, minister, you see that boxer, we need an winner. The only difference that the other one. So let us see that victory sign. Victory is ours. Victory is ours. Madoda. Banna. But be it as it may, I must say we appreciate the space, chance, and time to be here and to host you as Gauteng Provincial Government. And I would like to pass my special greetings to the Deputy Minister, to the UN representative, Ms. Shongwe, to our Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, and all other delegates that are here with us, the Chairperson of the Men's Sector, Mr. Dando, and his deputy, Dr. Madume, SG of Men's Movement in the country, Prof. Jas. We are really happy to talk this event today, of this summit, of this conference, and most of all of launching the national program in this province. It humbles us to see that despite all the challenges Gauteng has, we are moving in the right direction. So before I sit down, Chair, I would like us to capture what we are on, so that the Secretariat also understand what we are agreeing on. Firstly, we are in agreement that men's issues are not only gender relations and equality issues, but that there are also issues of spirituality, that there are issues of culture and tradition, that there are issues of peace and stability, that there are issues of health and wellness, and also there are issues of economic development. That is what we are in agreement with. That is why our speakers have touched into that. That is why our topic have touched into that. We also note that there is serious negative impact of alcohol in our society, that there is negative impact of anger in our society, and the negative impact of absentee fathers. So as this gathering today, we note that, and therefore we resolve that we will support and work with He for She campaign, with Mentoring a Boy-Child campaign, with faith-based organizations, and with traditional leaders. That is what we resolve to do. And we intend to continue with men's parliament throughout the country, to continue with public campaigns against GBVF, to continue with community men's dialogue. And lastly, we commit as this collective today of South African Men's Movement to support initiatives of men's forums and any other men's organization that seeks to fight all forms of patriarchy. And we also commit to work together with women's movement to lobby government for institutionalization of men and boys issues, and to expose the abuse of men and boys also in our society. And we also commit to integrate workers, youth, students, and sports fraternity in our work. And lastly, we therefore commit to report back as Profashilo when it's the right time. I think even the DM has reflected in that, to report back in what we are as men's movement in the country, so that we don't adopt a program, commit to implement it and disappear. But on behalf of MEC of Social Development in Gauteng, we are greatly humbled to be given this chance, space, and time to host you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me say I'm humbled to share the program with some of the most powerful women that have been in this podium today. It humbles me to speak after women as a moralist. I was humbled by the speech of the lady from the UN. She has hit it on the nail. My name is Tsepo Mokoena. I'm the uncle of the late Karabo Mokoena, who was brutally murdered and banned beyond recognition by Sandy Lemans. I know when I sit in the podium and talk about this, you can feel your blood moving. That's what men do to women. But it's not only what they do to women, but that's what angry men do to women. Men are angry. Men are in pain. Men does not want to accept that they've got mental health And maybe we all have, including myself, the levels are different. The deputy minister spoke about a man who does not earn a salary. That man tends to become a wolf. I once said to my son, whom I've worked hard with Mr. Ngomani to help him to move away from wit and anger. And he was at the level of taking the antidepressant, which is the thing that our young boys are taking now, which we need to fight very harshly. So. And I said to my son, after he was healed, after he fought the pain that I was part of, and the pain that I was part of is because I divorced with his mother. And I did not want to accept the wrong that I have done. That's the pain of the young man. I've put so much pain in that young man. Instead of me helping my son, I was always seeing the wrong in him. But the Almighty God came inside me, and me, we changed the young man.
Amen.
He could not come because he's a young man who's got a car now, who's driving, who's running some internship programs. I don't want to be long, because if I can speak, I'll move you, and that's not my intention. My role was just to say the vote of things. I said to my son one morning, there are two wolves that are inside each and every human being. There's a bad wolf and a good wolf. And my son said to me, Daddy, which one is powerful? I said, it is the one that you feed.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
We are feeding bad wolves as individuals. When a woman is angry because the man does not support the young man, he'll always bang the table and say horrible things to this young man, forgetting that he's putting more pain, more anger into this young man. Right? Deputy Minister, when I sat on the platform one day, I was invited by the former MEC of Gauteng Social Development, Dr. Mokhetsi. I was bulldozed by women, including, powerful women that I don't want to mention by name. And I said, sometimes it's because those young men who are so violent, they are actually raised by women. Before I could even finish my story, that it is the reason why those young men are so angry. It is because both their parents are angry. Yeah. The father has left the boy without any reason. Therefore, the mother is angry. And the mother does not realize that she is transforming the anger to this young man. That's why we will forever have people who are so violent in our country. It is because we entertain the bad wolves. Thank you, Deputy Minister, for the platform. Me and you share so much in common. I didn't know. Thank you, the pretty lady from the United Nations. Thank you for all the speakers. Thank you for all the men who are here. The most powerful thing you can ever do, or we can all do, is you can only change. The word change is forever. My father used to say, the word change is forever. I know there are men who come here and pretend to be smart and nice and everything. When they go back home, there are wolves. Please, let us all change, including women. I thank you, my brother.
Cape Town, bear with us. We are left with one speaker. Thank you so much, Ndate Mukwena and the Comrade Ngomani. Tina, everything is in the same strategy. We know why we chose you. So thank you so much for those words. And we'll continue to educate each other beyond these national launches. But I knew that you won't mention Parliament in your vote of thanks. And let me do it on your behalf. I would like to thank Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, especially the Office of the Deputy Speaker and the Office of the Deputy Chair of the OCOP. Thank you so much, especially Communications in Parliament, for connecting us. I would like also to thank Ebuhlanti TV show for connecting us here under the banner of Takwane Rime, a partnership with One Roof Production. This meeting will also appear on channel 251 next week on Saturday, 4 o'clock, and also on Starset. So thank you so much. I knew I need to me now. My duty is to keep the stakeholders close. Comrade Rantako, are you there?
I'm here, SG.
Okay, you can continue, my leaders.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, SG. You know, one day another man has said to one man, "Hey, lendoda igcoke kahle." And lendoda le responded in saying, "Kodwa mina ngamshaya." So now, this shows the level of violence that we have as men, that we prove our manhood with our muscles. Thank you very much. Let me start by greeting all excellencies. Ms. Sylvia Lucas, Ntate Tsenoli Lechesa, our mother, Mehereta Bukhupani Zulu, Memorakani Musupye, the leadership of the men's sector, and ladies and gentlemen. Ki hua madume ho bohle bao e leng karolo ya summit ena. We have reached the end of the event, and it is our task to provide some closing remarks. Now it is our privilege and honor to be entrusted with the undertaking. Program Director, I hear some other feedback when I'm talking. Can I continue? Can I continue, Program Director?
Yes, you can continue, Honorable Member.
Thank you, thank you. It is indeed an honor to be part of this historic event. There is indeed plenty to reflect upon, and this enhances our individual and collective contribution to meeting the men's sector challenges. Then this event can truly be a pronouncement of our success. As we have heard from the previous speakers on the program, there's a tough journey ahead of us. That says to us, for you to be truly part of this men's movement called Takwane Rime, you really have to be a tower that will stand firm in addressing the challenges that we have to address. Takuwani Rime is the broader movement or a broader church that solely allow everybody who is involved in men programs to come together and be part of the solution. We are, however, optimistic that we have all benefited in some way or another in this event. Numerous positions and point of views have been outlined and many messages have been delivered, covering the whole spectrum of social ills, particularly HIV, sexual and reproductive health, TB, gender-based violence, and other social challenges that we are faced with as men. We are currently faced with a new norm called the COVID-19, which is also contributing to the increase in the number of women and children that are facing gender-based violence. We like to briefly give an overview on the main points during the deliberation. One of the overriding messages is that together, let us be on a hunt for a macho mobile man and also acknowledge the abuse of men and boys. Secondly, is that we should carefully craft the program that will address the issues of angry boy. Patriarchy and misogyny is the main obstacle to gender equity. Men and boys must play a vital role in response to GBVF and sexual assault. It was also indicated that we must emulate the interventions like the He for She campaign, a campaign that will change our behavior and attitude towards women and children. It has also been emphasized that the men and boys championing change campaigns should provide a private space for men to reflect on their behavior and make informed decisions in addressing social challenges. Capacity building interventions should also be initiated to enhance the work of the men's sector. The men's sector will remain central stakeholder to our country's response to TB and gender-based violence. We hope and believe that we also, as Gauteng, will be the leading sector in ensuring that we address these social ills that we're talking about. We will only achieve these objectives if we work in collaboration with our government and other stakeholders. Finally, on behalf of you all, we would like to thank all those who participated in this gathering and all the best in implementing the Men and Boys program. Your presence has been valuable and without any doubt has helped make the event a great success. We greatly appreciate the support we have received from the members of the media covering this event. The National Parliament and other stakeholders. It is very important that the views expressed here are disseminated to a wider leadership and members of the community. And clearly this task has been in capable hands. We are also grateful to all those who have been involved in the organization of this event. Thank you to the Gauteng Social Development and the Takuwani Rime movement. Takuwani Rime. Thank you very much. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Late Rantako. Madota. Namke mandisibulisele ndibulele ngokuba nindinike ithuba ngokuthi nithi gqolo ukundinika ngawo onke amaxesha xa nindinika eli qonga. Nam ndibamba ngazo ngasibini. Ndiyathemba ke phaya emakhaya nabo bawuthi gqolo ukusixhasa. Uba asenzi kakuhle, we are appealing to all South Africans to report the structures in their communities. If there are men out there pretending that they are leaders of this movement, report those people to authorities or to your nearest social development department. Namke ndiyazibulelela, igama lam ke ndingumbulelo Lechesa. Thank you so much. Meeting adjourned. Sizoya lunch, and then 1:30, we are coming back as Gauteng men's movement, and this time we are alone without our principals. Now, dear lunch.
Bantu ukudla kuyeza bathi labo mama osagibelile. So what's going to happen? Uzophakelwa la ngaphandle then sizodlela ngaphakathi. Then apa briefing room bazoyodlela ku briefing room. So if ungekho ku briefing room angeke uyazi ukuthi. Thank you.